My name is Estelle, and at 64 years old, I never expected to be in this position. After my husband died, I moved to California and bought a beautiful home where I plan to enjoy my retirement. When my daughter Amanda and her family fell on hard times, I offered them my main house temporarily while I moved into the guest house. 3 years later, what was meant to be temporary had become permanent, and the gratitude had vanished. Just last week, Amanda screamed at me in front of her friends, "Pay your rent or get out." She had no idea I actually owned the entire property. If you've ever had your kindness taken for granted, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join me on this painful but ultimately healing journey. I grew up in a small town in Kansas, surrounded by cornfields and simple values. My father was a school teacher, and my mother stayed home to raise me and my two brothers. Life wasn't luxurious, but we never went without the essentials. I was taught that family always comes first, a principle I've carried with me throughout my entire life. I met Jack during my sophomore year of high school. He was quiet, thoughtful, and had the most genuine smile. We started dating when he finally worked up the courage to ask me to the winter formal. From that moment on, we were inseparable. After graduation, we both attended the local state university. I majored in elementary education, and Jack pursued business and finance. We married at 22 young by today's standards, but it felt right for us. Jack always had a sharp mind for numbers and investments. While I taught third grade at the local elementary school, he worked his way up through a regional investment firm. We lived modestly, but Jack was quietly building our wealth, investing in stocks, bonds, and eventually real estate. Our only daughter, Amanda, was born 3 years into our marriage. She was the light of our lives, a beautiful baby with Jack's eyes and my stubborn streak. I took a year off from teaching to be with her, and when I returned to work, Jack's mother helped with childcare. Amanda was a good child, though. Signs of entitlement appeared early. When she was 5, she had a meltdown in a toy store because we wouldn't buy her the expensive dollhouse she wanted. Jack and I tried to teach her the value of money and hard work, but perhaps we didn't do as well as we should have. We both came from humble beginnings and wanted to give her more than we had growing up. In retrospect, we may have overcompensated. Despite this, Amanda did well in school and had many friends. She was popular, involved in numerous extracurricular activities, and graduated with honors. We were immensely proud when she was accepted to UCLA with a partial scholarship. It was during college that she met Tyler. Tyler was charming, handsome, and could talk his way into or out of anything. Amanda fell head over heels for him, and while Jack and I had our reservations, we supported her choice. They married a year after graduation, a lavish wedding that Jack and I largely funded despite our suggestion for something more modest. Early in their marriage, Amanda and Tyler seemed to be doing well. She secured a position in marketing and he worked in sales. They purchased a small starter home with our help on the down payment and began building their life together. Within a few years, our grandchildren arrived: Sophia, then Lucas, and finally Emma. They were beautiful children, and being a grandmother brought me a joy I hadn't expected. Jack adored them too, setting up college funds for each child the day they were born. Life continued this way for several years until Jack was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came suddenly, and the progression was rapid and merciless. Within 8 months, my partner of 40 years was gone. I was 60, alone for the first time in my adult life, and completely devastated. After Jack's passing, I found myself in a 5-bedroom house filled with memories but empty of life. Amanda and her family would visit occasionally, but living in California while I remained in Kansas made frequent visits challenging. The winters had always been difficult for me, and without Jack, the cold felt more biting, the days longer and darker. With Jack's life insurance and our investments, I was financially secure. After much contemplation, I decided to move to California to be closer to Amanda and my grandchildren. I sold our Kansas home and purchased a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a pleasant suburban neighborhood about 20 minutes from Amanda's family. It had a lovely view of the ocean from the upstairs windows, a spacious yard with a garden, and most importantly, a detached guest house that I thought would be perfect for when friends or family came to visit. I had been living in my new California home for about a year, settling into retirement life, volunteering at the local library, and joining a gardening club when Amanda called me in tears. Tyler had been laid off from his job, and they were struggling to keep up with their mortgage payments. They had already fallen 2 months behind, and the bank was sending warning letters. Without hesitation, I offered to help them financially, but Amanda had another idea. Their lease was ending soon, and rather than renew it while struggling financially, she suggested they move in with me temporarily just for 6 months until they got back on their feet. My house was certainly large enough, and the thought of having my grandchildren close by was appealing. It would just be until Tyler finds a new job and we save enough for a security deposit on a new place. Amanda assured me. 6 months tops, Mom, I promise. I agreed immediately. To give them space and privacy, I suggested they take the main house while I moved into the guest house. Amanda protested weakly, but I could see the relief in her eyes at my offer. I truly didn't mind. The guest house was cozy with a bedroom, bathroom, small kitchen, and living area, plenty of space for just me. Within 2 weeks, Amanda, Tyler, and the children had moved in. The moving truck unloaded their furniture boxes and belongings, which quickly filled the main house. Initially, there was a sense of gratitude and appreciation. Amanda would bring me dinner occasionally, and the children would come to visit me in the guest house for cookies and stories. I was happy to have them close, to be able to see my grandchildren regularly, to feel useful and needed again. At 61, I was still active and independent, but having family nearby gave my life new purpose after losing Jack. Little did I know how quickly things would change and how much I would come to regret my generosity. The first signs of change were subtle. About 3 months into their stay, I noticed Amanda no longer consulted me before making changes to the house. The living room furniture was rearranged, walls were repainted from the soft beige I had chosen to a stark white, and the garden I had lovingly planted was partially removed to make room for a play structure for the children. "We just thought it would look better this way," Amanda said casually when I mentioned the repainting. "Don't worry, Mom, we'll change it back when we move out if you want." 6 months came and went with no mention of their moving plans. When I gently broached the subject over Sunday dinner, Amanda's expression immediately tightened. "Tyler's still interviewing," she said, her voice strained. "The job market is really tough right now. You don't want us to be homeless, do you?" Of course I didn't, and I quickly reassured her they could stay as long as needed. I didn't want to pressure them, especially with the children to consider. But I had begun to notice some inconsistencies in their financial hardship story. Despite claiming they couldn't afford rent elsewhere, Amanda had a closet full of new clothes with designer labels still attached. Tyler had upgraded his phone to the latest model, and they had subscribed to every streaming service available. One weekend, they left the children with me while they took a much-needed getaway to a luxury resort in Santa Barbara. "Tyler's brother gave us the trip as a gift," Amanda explained when I expressed surprise. I nodded, though I had my doubts. The dynamic with my grandchildren was changing too. Initially, Sophia, Lucas, and Emma would rush to greet me whenever they saw me. Now, at 12, 9, and 6, they had become increasingly distant. I would hear Amanda and Tyler referring to me as Grandma who lives out back when talking to the children. "Grandma doesn't need to be involved in everything we do." I overheard Amanda telling Sophia one afternoon when my granddaughter had suggested inviting me to her school concert. "She has her own life." Around the 2-year mark, with no end to the arrangement in sight, Tyler purchased a brand new SUV. It sat gleaming in the driveway, a stark contradiction to the financial struggles they continued to claim were keeping them from finding their own place. "It's a company car," Tyler explained when I commented on it. "Part of my new benefits package." So he had found a new job after all. I was pleased but confused about why this didn't mean they were preparing to move out. When I delicately raised this question, Amanda's response left me speechless. "Mom, do you know how expensive housing is in California? We can't possibly afford a place big enough for our family on our current income. Besides, the kids are settled in school now. It would be disruptive to move them." I swallowed my disappointment and nodded. After all, I had always put family first. But a growing unease had taken root in my heart, a feeling that something in this arrangement had fundamentally shifted without my consent. The guest house, which had initially felt cozy, now felt like an exile. I would sometimes stand at my window watching the lights in the main house, hearing laughter and life carrying on without me. I was becoming a stranger on my own property. As more time passed, small incidents of disrespect accumulated. Amanda would forget to invite me to family dinners. The children would be instructed to play quietly when Grandma is resting, even when I was very much awake and would have loved their company. Tyler began parking his new car in a way that partially blocked my access to the walkway to the main house. "Oh, sorry about that," he would say when I mentioned it, only to do the same thing the next day. I started to feel increasingly uncomfortable walking to the main house unannounced. What had once been my home now felt like forbidden territory unless specifically invited. I found myself texting before coming over, asking permission to enter what was legally my own property. Friends from my gardening club noticed the change in me. Margaret, who had become my closest friend in California, expressed concern one day after our meeting. "Estelle, you don't seem yourself lately," she said as we walked to our cars. "Is everything all right with Amanda and her family?" I hesitated, embarrassed to admit the truth. "They've been staying with me longer than expected," I finally said. "I'm just adjusting to the arrangement." Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. "They're staying with you. In your house, I thought you were staying with them from the way Amanda talks at the school functions." My heart sank. So Amanda was telling people I was living with them, not the other way around. The realization stung more than I cared to admit. "It's my house." I clarified, my voice smaller than I intended. "I'm just in the guest house to give them more space." Margaret's expression softened with concern. "Estelle, that's not right. You need to talk to them about this." I nodded, but in truth, I was afraid. Afraid of conflict, afraid of damaging my relationship with my only child, afraid of losing access to my grandchildren. So I remained silent, hoping things would improve on their own. They didn't. The first time Amanda suggested I should pay for utilities, I thought she was joking. We were in the kitchen of the main house, a space I now entered with the hesitancy of a guest rather than an owner. "Mom, Tyler and I were looking at the electric bill, and it's gone up quite a bit since you've been using the guest house," Amanda said casually while chopping vegetables for dinner. "We think it's only fair if you contribute to the utilities." I paused, knife midway through a carrot. "Amanda, I own this house. The utilities are in my name, and I pay them." She continued chopping, not meeting my eyes. "Well, we're the ones managing all the bills now, and the guest house uses separate electricity for heating and cooling. It makes sense for you to cover your portion." Before I could respond, Tyler walked in and placed an arm around Amanda's shoulders. "Hey, freeloader," he said with a laugh, looking at me. "Just kidding, Estelle, but seriously, we're all adults here. Everyone should pull their weight, right?" I felt a flush of embarrassment and anger. "I am pulling my weight," I said quietly. "This is my property. I'm allowing you to live in the main house as a favor while you get back on your feet." Tyler's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's been our home for over 2 years now, Estelle, and property taxes and maintenance aren't cheap. We're just talking about fair contribution here." I left shortly after, a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. The conversation marked a turning point, the first explicit indication that Amanda and Tyler no longer viewed themselves as guests in my home, but as the rightful occupants. A week later, Amanda approached me with a printed sheet of paper. "Mom, we've calculated your portion of the monthly expenses," she said, sliding the paper across the small table in my guest house kitchen. "It comes to $400 for utilities, plus we thought $200 for maintenance of the property would be fair." I stared at the paper in disbelief. "Amanda, I pay the mortgage on this property. I own it outright." She shifted uncomfortably. "But Tyler and I are the ones maintaining it. We mow the lawn, clean the pool, and take care of repairs. That's worth something, isn't it? Plus, with you in the guest house, our water and electricity usage is higher." "I bought this house with the money from selling the home your father and I shared for 40 years. I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I invited you to stay temporarily while you got back on your feet." Amanda's expression hardened. "That was a long time ago, Mom. Circumstances change. We've made this place our home. The kids are settled here. You can't expect us to just leave, and you can't expect to live here completely free of any contribution." I was too stunned to argue further. $600 a month was a significant sum from my fixed retirement income. I could afford it thanks to Jack's careful financial planning, but the principle of it cut deep. My own daughter was essentially charging me rent to live on my own property. Over the next few months, Amanda began gradually restricting my access to the main house even further. What started as suggestions, "Mom, could you call before coming over?" "Sometimes we're busy with the kids," evolved into explicit rules. "Mom, from now on, please don't come to the main house before 9 in the morning or after 8 at night." Amanda told me one day. "The kids need their routine, and unexpected visits disrupt that." My access to my grandchildren became increasingly limited. I was allowed to see them during scheduled visits, but the spontaneous moments of grandparenting I had dreamed of were disappearing. No more impromptu cookie baking sessions or helping with homework unless it was pre-approved by Amanda. The neighbors had begun to notice the strange dynamics as well. Mrs. Peterson, who lived next door, stopped me one day as I was collecting my mail. Estelle, is everything all right? She asked, concern evident in her voice. I noticed you seem to be staying in the guest house most of the time now. I mustered a smile. Everything's fine, just giving Amanda and her family space. Mrs. Peterson frowned slightly. I heard Amanda telling someone you were living with them temporarily while looking for your own place. I was confused because I thought this was your house. The revelation sent a wave of hurt through me. Not only was Amanda charging me to live in my own property, but she was also spreading misinformation about our arrangement to others. The narrative had been completely flipped, casting me as the dependent one rather than the provider. My sadness deepened when I discovered that Amanda was telling family members back in Kansas the same story. My sister called one evening, her voice concerned. Estelle, Amanda mentioned you're having financial difficulties and had to move in with her family. Why didn't you tell me I could help? Tears sprang to my eyes as I explained the truth. My sister was outraged on my behalf, urging me to set boundaries, but I was paralyzed by fear of losing my relationship with my grandchildren entirely. Still, I tried to maintain connections with Sophia, Lucas, and Emma despite the barriers. I would leave small gifts and notes for them, offer to drive them to activities when Amanda and Tyler were busy, and make myself available whenever they were allowed to visit the guest house. But I could sense a growing distance, especially with Sophia, who at 12 was old enough to absorb the attitudes of her parents. "Grandma, why don't you get your own house?" she asked innocently during one visit, breaking my heart with the realization that she had no idea this was my property. The final straw came when I overheard Amanda on the phone with a friend. "Yeah, Mom's living with us now. It's challenging sometimes, but what can you do? Family obligation, you know. At least she's contributing a little financially now." In that moment, something broke inside me. I had allowed my daughter to rewrite our reality, to transform my generosity into dependence, to convert my sacrifice into a burden. And for the first time, I began to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake in trying to help her family. It was a warm Saturday evening when everything finally shattered beyond repair. Amanda and Tyler were hosting a dinner party for friends from their neighborhood and work. I hadn't been invited, of course, but I could hear the music and laughter from my guest house. The windows of the main house glowed warmly in the twilight, figures moving about inside, enjoying what had once been my home. I realized I had left my medication in the main house earlier that day when I had been allowed to visit the grandchildren. Rather than disturb the party, I decided to slip in quietly through the side door that led directly to the kitchen, grab my pills from the counter where I had left them, and leave without anyone noticing. The kitchen was empty when I entered, the sounds of conversation and laughter coming from the dining room. I spotted my pill bottle and was just reaching for it when Amanda walked in to retrieve another bottle of wine. She froze when she saw me, her expression immediately darkening. "Mom, what are you doing here? I told you we were having guests tonight." "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I just needed to get my heart medication. I left it here earlier. I'll go right away." Before Amanda could respond, Tyler appeared in the doorway, followed by several of their friends whom I recognized from previous brief encounters. "Estelle joining the party," Tyler said, his tone jovial but his eyes cold. "Didn't realize we'd extended the invitation to the guest house." I clutched my pill bottle, embarrassment washing over me. No, just getting my medication. I'm leaving now." Amanda's face was flushed, whether from wine or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. But what happened next would change everything between us. "Mom," she said loudly, clearly intending for everyone to hear, "we've talked about this. You can't just come into our house whenever you want. We have boundaries." I felt as though I'd been slapped. "Your house," I repeated, my voice barely audible. Amanda continued as if I hadn't spoken. "We're trying to have a nice dinner with friends. If you need something, you should text first like we agreed." One of their friends, a woman I didn't recognize, looked uncomfortable. "We don't mind, Amanda. Your mom is welcome to join us." But Amanda wasn't finished. Her next words hit me like a physical blow. "Mom, you need to start paying rent or find somewhere else to live. We can't keep supporting you like this." The kitchen fell silent. I stared at my daughter, this person I had raised, this woman who had completely rewritten the reality of our situation to make herself the provider and me the burden. In that moment, I saw not just entitlement, but something darker, a willingness to humiliate and control that I had never imagined my child capable of. I see, was all I could manage to say. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, out of the house that was legally mine, but had been taken from me in every way that mattered. Back in the guest house, I sat on the edge of my bed, the pill bottle still clutched in my hand, and finally allowed the tears to come. I cried for hours that night, mourning not just the loss of my home, but the loss of the daughter I thought I had raised, the family I thought we were. The next morning, I received a text message from Amanda. I've drafted a rental agreement, $1 and $200 month plus utilities, starting next month. We can discuss terms when you're ready to be reasonable. Attached was a document titled Rental Agreement, laying out in cold legal language the terms under which I would be permitted to continue living in the guest house on my own property. Later that day, Tyler came to the guest house, his expression smug. Amanda asked me to see if you've had time to review the agreement, he said, leaning against the doorframe without waiting for an invitation to enter. We think it's more than fair considering market rates for a place like this. Tyler, I said quietly, this is my property. I own this house. I allowed you and Amanda to stay here temporarily. He had the audacity to laugh. Look, Estelle, I know it's hard to accept being dependent at your age, but let's be real. You've been living with us for years now. We've been carrying the costs, managing the property, handling everything while you enjoy your retirement in the guest house. It's time you contributed fairly. As he spoke, something shifted inside me. The grief and shock of the previous night transformed into a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I realized that no amount of sacrifice or generosity on my part would ever be enough. The more I gave, the more they would take until there was nothing left of me at all. I'll think about it, I said finally, just to end the conversation. Tyler nodded, apparently satisfied with what he perceived as my capitulation. Good. Amanda was worried you'd be difficult about this. Take a few days, but we'll need an answer by the end of the week, and the first payment by the 1st of next month. After he left, I sat in silence for a long time, contemplating how I had allowed this situation to develop, how my desire to help my family had led to such a complete inversion of reality. And for the first time, I began to consider what it might mean to take back control not just of my property, but of my life. I picked up my phone and called Barbara, my oldest friend from Kansas, and a retired attorney who had helped handle Jack's estate after his death. It was time to reclaim what was mine. Barbara, I need your help, I said as soon as she answered. The tremor in my voice must have alarmed her. Estelle, what's wrong? Are you all right? I took a deep breath and explained everything. The words pouring out of me, the initial temporary arrangement, the gradual takeover of my property, the increasing restrictions, and finally, the humiliating confrontation and demand for rent. Barbara listened in stunned silence until I finished. Oh, Estelle, she said finally. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was embarrassed. I admitted, ashamed that I had raised a daughter who would treat me this way, afraid of losing access to my grandchildren if I stood up for myself. Well, that ends now, Barbara said firmly. First things first. I need you to send me all the documentation showing your ownership of the property. Over the next few days, Barbara and I worked together remotely. She confirmed what I already knew legally: the house was entirely mine. Amanda and Tyler had no claim to it whatsoever, regardless of how long they had been staying there. You have every right to ask them to leave, Barbara assured me, and no obligation to pay them a cent. But as we dug deeper into the situation, Barbara uncovered something that shocked me even more. Through mutual friends still in contact with Amanda's former colleagues, she discovered that Tyler had not been struggling to find employment at all. In fact, he had received a significant promotion at his company over a year ago with a substantial salary increase. And Amanda had been working full-time remotely for a tech company for the past 18 months, earning a comfortable income herself. Estelle, their combined income is more than enough to afford their own home, Barbara told me. They've been lying to you about their financial situation. The revelation was like a final veil lifting. All this time, I had believed they were staying with me out of financial necessity. I had sacrificed my comfort, my home, my dignity to help them through what I thought was a difficult time. But it had all been a lie, a manipulation to take advantage of my generosity. With Barbara's encouragement, I contacted a real estate agent to explore my options. Mark Evans was recommended by a friend from my gardening club as someone trustworthy and discreet. When we met at a coffee shop away from my neighborhood, I explained my situation as briefly as I could. I need to sell my house, but the current occupants don't know yet that I'm planning to do so. Mark asked careful questions about the legal ownership, which I was able to answer clearly thanks to Barbara's guidance. Once satisfied that I was indeed the sole owner, he arranged to drive by the property without stopping to get a general sense of its value. Based on the location and what I can see from outside, I'd estimate the property value at around $750,000, he told me during our next meeting, possibly more with a full inspection given the current market. The figure took my breath away. Jack and I had always lived modestly, investing carefully rather than spending lavishly. I had purchased the California property for significantly less 5 years ago, and property values had risen sharply since then. How quickly could it be sold? I asked. Mark leaned forward. In this market with a property like yours, if you're willing to price it competitively, I have investors who would make a cash offer and close within weeks, possibly even without requiring extensive inspections or repairs. A plan began to form in my mind. With the proceeds from the sale, I could purchase a comfortable condo for myself, something easier to maintain as I aged, perhaps even in the same area to remain close to my grandchildren. But more importantly, I could reclaim my independence, my dignity, and my life. I'd like to move forward, I told Mark, as quickly and quietly as possible. Over the next week, I began making preparations. I contacted Barbara again, who helped me locate a suitable condominium in a pleasant community about 15 minutes from my current home. It was smaller than the house, but more than adequate for my needs, with 2 bedrooms so the grandchildren could still visit, assuming Amanda would allow it after everything was resolved. I also began quietly removing personal treasures and mementos from the main house when Amanda and Tyler were at work. Family photos, the quilt my grandmother had made, Jack's collection of first edition books, these irreplaceable items were relocated to a small storage unit I rented nearby. I was careful to take only what was undeniably mine, items of sentimental, rather than monetary value, things that Amanda and Tyler wouldn't immediately notice were missing. Throughout this process, I maintained a facade of normalcy. I didn't respond to Amanda's rental agreement, but neither did I openly reject it. When asked, I said I was still considering my options, buying time while my real plan took shape. The cash buyer is ready to move forward, Mark informed me 10 days after our initial meeting. $750,000 as is, with a 30-day close. Do you want to accept? I thought of the home I had lovingly chosen for my retirement, now transformed into a place where I felt unwelcome and diminished. I thought of my daughter's contemptuous demand for rent, her public humiliation of me, her lies about our arrangement. I thought of Tyler's smug condescension and the grandchildren being taught that I was a burden rather than the provider I truly was. Yes, I said firmly. I accept. The paperwork was handled discreetly. I met with the buyers, a couple who planned to renovate the property as an investment, at Mark's office. They seemed kind and straightforward, interested primarily in the property's potential rather than its current occupants. There are people living in the house currently, I explained. My daughter and her family. They will need to be given proper notice. The buyers nodded understandingly. Not a problem. We can handle the legal notice to vacate once the sale is complete if you prefer. I considered this, then shook my head. No, that's my responsibility. 3 days later, I signed the final papers, officially selling the house. The money was transferred into my account, and I became, legally speaking, no longer the owner of the property. My new condo would not be ready for move-in for another 3 weeks, but Barbara had offered her guest room in the meantime. All that remained was to inform Amanda and Tyler that their time in my now former home was coming to an end. The new owners had agreed to serve the formal eviction notice, but I felt I owed it to my daughter to tell her myself face to face what was about to happen. I stood outside the front door of the main house, a house that was no longer mine, gathering my courage. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Tyler was at work, but Amanda would be home working remotely as she did most days. The children would still be at school. It seemed the best time for what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation. I knocked on the door rather than using my key, a small acknowledgement that things had fundamentally changed. Amanda opened it, surprise flickering across her face at the formality. Mom, why are you knocking? Did you forget your key? May I come in? I asked quietly. We need to talk. Something in my tone must have alerted her that this wasn't a routine visit. She stepped back, allowing me to enter. The living room, once decorated with the soft blues and greens I had chosen, had been transformed with stark modern furniture and abstract art I didn't care for. It reinforced my decision, this visual reminder that this was no longer the home I had created. "What's going on?" Amanda asked, her arms crossed defensively. I sat down on one of the angular couches, smoothing my skirt with trembling hands. "Amanda, I've sold the house." For a moment, she didn't react, as if the words didn't make sense. Then her eyes widened. "What are you talking about? What house?" "This house," I said simply. "My house. The one I purchased after selling the home your father and I shared in Kansas. The one I invited you and your family to stay in temporarily while you got back on your feet. The one you've been living in for the past 3 years." Amanda's face flushed red. "That's ridiculous. You can't sell this house. We live here." "I am the legal owner," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Or rather, I was. The sale was finalized yesterday. The new owners will be serving an official notice to vacate soon. You'll have 30 days to find new accommodations. Amanda stared at me, shock giving way to anger. "You can't do this to us. This is our home. We have children, for God's sake. Where are we supposed to go?" "You and Tyler have been working full-time for over a year now," I said. "Your combined income is more than adequate to rent or even purchase your own home." Her expression froze. "How do you know about our jobs?" "That's not important," I said. "What matters is that you lied to me, Amanda. You told me you were struggling financially when you weren't. You've been taking advantage of my generosity for years. So, you're punishing us, throwing your own grandchildren out on the street? What kind of grandmother are you?" Her voice had risen to a shout, her face contorted with rage. "I'm the kind of grandmother who taught her children about consequences," I replied, fighting to keep my voice level. "The kind who will not allow herself to be taken advantage of, even by family. Especially by family." Amanda's phone had rang suddenly, cutting through the tension. She glanced at it, then back at me, her expression changing from anger to confusion as she answered. "Yes, this is Amanda Winters." "What eviction notice? I don't understand." I stood up, knowing the new owners must have decided to proceed with the formal notification immediately. Part of me felt relieved as it removed the burden from my shoulders, but another part ached at the shock and panic growing on my daughter's face as the reality of the situation dawned on her. "No, there must be a mistake," she was saying into the phone. "This is our house." "What do you mean, new owners?" "My mother lives with us. She doesn't—" Her eyes locked on mine, realization dawning. I'll call you back," she said, finally ending the call. "You really did it," she whispered. "You sold the house out from under us." "The house was always mine, Amanda," I said quietly. "I allowed you to stay out of love, but you and Tyler twisted that into something ugly. You tried to charge me rent for my own property. You humiliated me in front of your friends. You restricted my access to my grandchildren. You lied about our arrangement to everyone, including family." Amanda's phone rang again. This time it was Tyler. She answered, her voice shaking as she explained what was happening. I could hear his raised voice from where I stood, demanding to speak to me. Amanda held out the phone. I took it, bracing myself. "Hello, Tyler." "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted. "You can't sell our house." "It was never your house," I said firmly. "Check the property records if you don't believe me. I purchased it with my money. I allowed you to stay temporarily. That arrangement has now ended." "We'll fight this," he threatened. "We have rights as tenants. We'll get a lawyer." "You're welcome to consult an attorney," I said, Barbara's advice fresh in my mind. "But as you never signed a lease, never paid rent until you tried to charge me for my own property, and have been there solely at my discretion, I think you'll find your position is legally tenuous at best." Tyler's tone changed, becoming wheedling. "Estelle, come on. We can work this out. We're family. Think about the kids." "I've thought about the children," I said. "I've thought about what example I'm setting for them by allowing myself to be mistreated. I've thought about what they're learning from watching their parents take advantage of their grandmother." You spiteful old woman, Tyler hissed, his true colors showing again. Amanda was right about you all along. I handed the phone back to Amanda, whose tears had started to fall. 30 days, Amanda. The new owners are being more than generous. Most investors would give you less time. Where will you go? She asked, a hint of genuine concern breaking through her anger. I've purchased a condominium, son, I told her. It will be ready in 3 weeks. Until then, I'll be staying with Barbara. You planned this all behind our backs, she accused, while pretending everything was normal. The irony of her accusation after years of her own deception wasn't lost on me. Yes, I admitted. I did. I learned from watching you and Tyler that sometimes directness isn't the best approach. As I turned to leave, Amanda's phone rang a third time. I heard her answer as I walked toward the door to... Mom, she called after me. Mom, the eviction notice says the whole property, including the guest house. You can't even stay there. I paused at the door, looking back at my daughter, this woman I had raised and loved, but no longer fully recognized. I know, I said simply and walked out. The next 30 days were among the most difficult of my life. Amanda and Tyler alternated between rage manipulation and desperate attempts at reconciliation. They enlisted family members to call and plead their case. They threatened legal action. They tried guilt, claiming I was destroying my grandchildren's stability. But the most painful tactic was when they began telling the children that Grandma is making us homeless. Sophia at 12 was old enough to understand the concept of property ownership, and I tried to explain to her what had really happened during a rare moment when Amanda allowed her to see me. But Mom says you're being mean because she asked you to pay rent, Sophia said, her young face troubled. She says you're punishing us because you're angry at her. Sophia, sweetheart, this house has always been mine, I told her gently. I bought it with money from selling Grandpa's and my house in Kansas. I let your mom and dad and you children stay here because I love you and wanted to help when they said they were having money problems. So why are you making us leave now? She asked. The innocent question cutting straight to my heart. How could I explain to a child the complex emotions of betrayal, the humiliation of being treated as a burden in my own home, the slow erosion of my dignity? In the end, I settled for a simplified truth. Sometimes people forget to be grateful for help, I said. Sometimes they start thinking they deserve things that are actually gifts. When that happens, it's important to remind them of the truth, even if it's hard. Sophia didn't fully understand, I could see that. But she hugged me before she left, whispering, I'm still going to love you, Grandma, even if Mom and Dad are mad. Those words sustained me through the difficult days that followed. Amanda and Tyler began packing, making a show of their displacement, leaving boxes strewn across the lawn as if to publicly shame me. They found a rental home about 40 minutes away, more affordable than the area where my house was located, but perfectly adequate. As the final days approached, Amanda made one last desperate attempt to change my mind. She came to Barbara's house where I was staying and begged me to reconsider. Mom, please, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. We'll pay rent, real rent. We'll respect your space. We made mistakes. I see that now. Don't do this to us. Looking at my daughter, I felt a complex mix of love, sadness, and resolve. Amanda, I said gently, this isn't just about the house anymore. This is about respect, honesty, and consequences. You and Tyler lied to me for years. You tried to rewrite reality, casting yourselves as my benefactors rather than the beneficiaries of my generosity. You restricted my access to my own property and to my grandchildren. You humiliated me publicly. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I believe you're sorry now, I said. But not because you recognize the wrong in what you did. You're sorry because there are consequences you didn't expect. That's not the same as true remorse. What can I do to fix this? She asked, desperation in her voice. You can accept the reality of the situation, I told her. You can find your own place, establish your independence honestly, and begin rebuilding our relationship based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. It won't happen overnight, but it can happen if you're willing to do the work. Amanda left without promising anything, her expression a mixture of defeat and lingering resentment. The next day, the moving trucks arrived at the house. I watched from a distance as my daughter's family removed their belongings from what had once been my dream retirement home. As they drove away, a chapter of my life closed. But despite the pain and difficulty, despite the knowledge that the road to healing our relationship would be long and uncertain, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: the quiet dignity of standing up for myself, of refusing to be diminished or exploited, even by those I loved most in the world. The first weeks in my new condominium were strangely quiet. After years of hearing the distant sounds of family life from the main house, the silence was both peaceful and lonely. My new home was comfortable, a two-bedroom unit in a pleasant community with a small garden area that satisfied my love of plants without requiring extensive maintenance. I missed my grandchildren terribly. Following the move, there was complete silence from Amanda and Tyler. No calls, no texts, no updates on the children. I respected their need for space while they adjusted to their new reality, but each day without contact was a small heartbreak. Barbara visited often, her steady presence a comfort during this difficult transition. "Give them time," she advised. "They're licking their wounds right now. Pride is a powerful thing, and theirs has taken a significant blow." I tried to establish a new routine for myself. I joined the condominium's gardening committee, volunteered at the local library 2 mornings a week, and took a watercolor class I had always been interested in, but never pursued. Slowly, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been submerged during the years of increasing isolation and diminishment in my own home. 3 weeks after the move, my phone rang with Amanda's number. My heart raced as I answered. "Mom." Her voice sounded small, hesitant. "Amanda," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral despite my surging emotions. "How are you? How are the children?" "We're adjusting," she said. "The new place is smaller and the commute is longer for Tyler, but we're making it work." An awkward silence fell between us, years of unspoken hurt and resentment creating a chasm that simple conversation couldn't easily bridge. "The kids miss you," she finally said. "Especially Emma. She keeps asking when she can see Grandma." Tears sprang to my eyes at the mention of my youngest grandchild. "I miss them too, all of them, and you, Amanda." Another pause. "Would it be okay if I brought them to visit this weekend just for an hour or so, to see your new place?" It was a small olive branch, tentative and fragile, but it was something. "I'd like that very much," I said, trying to keep the emotion from overwhelming my voice. That first visit was awkward and strained. Amanda remained in the car, sending the children in alone, unable or unwilling to face me directly yet. The children were subdued, especially Sophia, who seemed torn between loyalty to her parents and her love for me. "Your new house is small, Grandma," Lucas observed with the blunt honesty of a 9-year-old. "Yes, it is," I agreed. "But it's just the right size for me. And look, I have a special drawer just for art supplies for when you visit." Emma's face lit up at this, and for a brief moment the tension eased as the children explored the art materials I had purchased specifically with them in mind. When they left an hour later, I stood at the window watching them climb back into Amanda's car, my heart both lighter for having seen them and heavier with the knowledge of how much damage needed to be repaired. The visits became a regular occurrence every other weekend. Gradually, Amanda began coming inside rather than waiting in the car, though our interactions remained formal and guarded. We circled each other carefully, neither fully ready to address the elephants in the room. About 3 months after the move, I received a surprising text from Tyler. "Can we talk, just the two of us?" We met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. Tyler looked different somehow, the smugness gone from his expression, replaced by something that resembled humility. "I owe you an apology, Estelle," he said after we had settled with our drinks. "What Amanda and I did. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong at the time, but it was convenient, and once we started down that path, it was easier to keep going than to admit what we were doing." His unexpected candor took me aback. "What changed?" I asked. He stared into his coffee. "Watching Amanda struggle with what happened, seeing how it affected the kids, and honestly having to face the reality of our finances without the cushion of free housing. It's been educational." "I imagine it has," I said, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from my voice. Tyler looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I deserved that. I deserved worse, actually. But I want you to know that I'm working on being better. For Amanda, for the kids, and because I don't like the person I became in that house." It wasn't a complete redemption, but it was a start. Tyler and I spoke for nearly 2 hours that day, clearing the air in ways that Amanda and I had not yet been able to manage. When we parted, there was a tentative peace between us, the first fragile foundation for rebuilding. Amanda's journey toward reconciliation was slower and more complicated. The breach of trust between mother and daughter ran deeper, the hurt on both sides more profound. It was Emma's birthday 6 months after the move that finally cracked the ice. "Please come to her party, Mom," Amanda said during one of the grandchildren's visits. "She specifically asked for you to be there. I know things are still difficult between us, but for Emma..." The birthday party was at a local park, a simple celebration with cake and games. I arrived with carefully chosen gifts and a heart full of trepidation. To my surprise, Amanda met me at my car, helping me carry the presents. "Thank you for coming," she said, her eyes meeting mine briefly before darting away. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied. As the party progressed, I found myself observing Amanda interacting with the other parents. There was a new maturity in her manner, a groundedness that hadn't been there before. She caught me watching and came to sit beside me while the children played a game supervised by Tyler. "We're in family therapy," she said abruptly, answering the unasked question. "Tyler and I, and the kids too sometimes. It's helping us understand what happened, why we did what we did." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "I was so angry at you," Amanda continued, her voice low. "For selling the house, for abandoning us. That's how I saw it. It took months of therapy for me to recognize that we had abandoned you first in every way that mattered." Tears pricked at my eyes. "I never wanted it to come to that," I said. "I just didn't know how else to reclaim my dignity and my independence." "I know that now," Amanda said. "I couldn't see it then, but I do now." "Ew, Mom. I'm so sorry. Not just for the end, but for all of it. For taking advantage of your generosity, for lying about our finances, for treating you like a burden when you were actually our benefactor, for turning the grandchildren against you. For all of it." For the first time since the night of the dinner party, I saw genuine remorse in my daughter's eyes, not just regret for the consequences, but true understanding of the harm she had caused. "I forgive you, Amanda," I said, reaching for her hand. "But rebuilding trust will take time." She nodded, squeezing my hand. "I know. I'm willing to do the work, Mom, however long it takes." In the year that followed, our family slowly healed. It wasn't always smooth or easy. There were setbacks, moments of tension and misunderstanding, old patterns threatening to reassert themselves. But there was also growth and genuine change. Amanda and Tyler became more financially responsible, learning to live within their means rather than beyond them. They saved for a down payment and eventually purchased a modest home of their own, achieved through honest work rather than manipulation. The grandchildren flourished once the tension between the adults in their lives began to ease. Sophia, in particular, seemed to blossom, our relationship deepening as she entered her teenage years. She would often come to stay with me for weekends, just the two of us baking cookies and working on art projects together. As for me, I discovered a new chapter in life I hadn't anticipated. My watercolor hobby evolved into a small business selling hand-painted greeting cards at local craft fairs. I made new friends, traveled a bit, and found joy in the freedom of being answerable only to myself. The most profound change, however, was within. I had learned painfully but powerfully that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to diminish you. That generosity should be met with gratitude, not exploitation. That boundaries are not just permissible but necessary, even within families, perhaps especially within families. On the anniversary of the sale of the house, Amanda and her family came to dinner at my condominium. As we sat around my smaller but adequate dining table enjoying a meal we had prepared together, I looked at these people I loved so dearly. They weren't perfect, nor was I. We had hurt each other, disappointed each other, failed each other in significant ways. But we had also found our way back to one another, changed but intact, wiser for the journey. "I'd like to make a toast," Tyler said, raising his glass, "to Estelle, for having the courage to teach us a lesson we desperately needed to learn, and for having the grace to give us a second chance afterward. To Grandma?" The children echoed, lifting their juice glasses. Amanda's eyes met mine across the table, full of the complex love that can only exist between people who have wounded and forgiven one another. To Mom, she said softly, who showed me what real strength looks like. As I raised my own glass, I felt a profound sense of peace. The path had been difficult, the cost high, but the outcome worth every painful step. I had reclaimed not just my dignity and independence, but something even more precious, a family relationship built on mutual respect, rather than exploitation, on genuine love, rather than obligation. It was a lesson I hoped my grandchildren would carry with them into their own adult lives, that true love sets healthy boundaries, that generosity should never be taken for granted, and that it's never too late to recognize your mistakes and begin again. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately strengthened a relationship? Even though it caused pain in the moment, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more from me. Remember to share this with someone who might need to be reminded that setting boundaries with family is an act of love, not just for yourself, but for them, too. Thank you for listening, and I hope you find the courage to stand up for yourself when needed with both firmness and compassion.